Welcome to Wartime Cafe. Our episode this week is with Ali Hassan Mourad. He's a researcher at the Consultative Center for Studies and Documentation, known colloquially as Hizbullah's think tank. Ali has been a prolific writer, wrote since 2015 in al-Akhbar and other outlets, and he has his latest book called Under the Capitol Dome, Breaking Down American Accusations about Hezbollah's Role in Latin America. Ali, thank you for being with us this week.
Thank you for having me.
We always like to start our show by getting our audience to know our guest. There's very little humanization of our thinkers, of our warriors here in the region. And I think as far as I know, you are from Brital in the Beqa Valley of Lebanon.
Yes.
Tell us about Brital, tell us about your history there. What is so special about Brital that will birth somebody of your caliber?
Actually, this village has a brief history fighting occupation, whether it was the Turkish occupation, then the French occupation, and until recently, the Israeli occupation. Though the Israelis, the Zionists, didn't reach the village, but the core group that founded Hezbollah, they resided in Brital for a short period of time. Also, the training camps that the fighters, the early fighters, they had their exercises at the outskirts of Brital in the mountains. Also, the leadership of Hezbollah, the early leadership of Hezbollah, they stayed for a while in Brital. Also, the IRGC, who came to Lebanon to train the Lebanese, they had Brital as a base, you can say as a base for them in the first 2 years. So since 1982, and even before that, Brital has a story with Sayyid Musa Sadr, the founder of Amal movement. So this village has been central in the early preparations for the resistance, whether it was Amal movement and later on the Islamic movement with the Hezbollah. So I was raised in this environment. My dad used to be a presenter at a radio station. It was the first radio station of Hezbollah. It was called Voice of the Oppressed.
Uh-huh.
So I lived since my childhood the state of resistance.
So the presence of your father working for the media and this radio station, Voice of the Oppressed, and being in this environment, motivated you, got you to know more of these things. So tell us about your father and his experience producing in those early days radio from Brital in resistance while the occupation is just a few kilometers away south.
Yes, actually, when I was like 6 years old, my dad used to work for the station. So whenever there was a military operation for the resistance in South Lebanon, Zionist war jets used to come bomb certain sites and training camps in the Beqa Valley. And of course, the antenna or the building of the radio station used to be a target. So whenever we heard the roaring of the jets, we used to get outside and take a look towards Baalbek, where the station was located. So we were always worried about my dad because his work was it was complementary to the work of the fighters, the resistance fighters in South Lebanon. My dad used to be the the one who calls for the the battalions during the military parades and Al-Quds Day. I used to go with him when I was a kid, stay next to him. It was a nice memory I still have, and perhaps it shaped my character as I grew up, dealing with the conscience about our battle with the occupation force, and later on with imperialism and so on, as I grew up and I studied at the university, then later when I started working as a journalist, and recently as a researcher.
Okay, so you have a lot of specialization in the U.S. affairs. Looking at some of your publications in al-Akhbar and the book, U.S. affairs, the political economy and how that plays into it, and the relationship between the political economy and internal affairs of the United States with the resistance here and the Arabic people in general. So let's dive into some of that specialization. I read an article that you published in al-Akhbar titled America's Violent History Towards Americans. And specifically, you're trying to deal with the myths that are in people's minds in our region here about America the good, America human rights, and so on. And I personally also wrote something very close in context in al-Akhbar. Let's try to destroy some of these myths. Maybe some of our audience in the West that hasn't heard some of these critiques because they live under the bubble.
Exactly.
Maybe they'll benefit from this, as our Arabic people are benefiting from the writers publishing like you. So the biggest myth that the U.S. is based on is the American Revolution.
Exactly.
Yes.
It all starts with the talk about, we went to the university and we were taught that the first revolution, democratic revolution, was the American Revolution. The founding fathers, they wrote the Bill of Rights. They made a wonderful constitution. I used to adopt those thoughts for years until I went to dig and read what is untold, actually. It's not mainstream. You have to dig to get those information, because you are going to rethink the whole history that they presented to us. It turned out that the founding fathers, they were the executive branch of some capitalists who made their wealth through the slavery business. So they said, in conclusion, they said, why we have to keep ourselves under the governance of the British monarch. We can govern ourselves. So they funded the militias who fought the British. And in 1767, those capitalists, they defeated the British, and they declared the independence. And if you go read the history, actually every century there's a move concerning the human rights and the claiming to making a new step towards freeing the humans in the United States, because they made the state in 1767, later in 1780 the Congress, the elections, the whole system, the political system was shaping. But starting from the 19th century, at the beginning of the 19th century, the industrial capitalists in the North, they started to think in a beneficial way. Why we should keep on, expanding our business on the shoulders of slaves when we can make those slaves workers who get paid, so they will turn into consumers. This was the smart move they made. So if you go to the history, the first half of the 19th century, most of the northern states, they declared that they free the Africans, no more enslaving slavery. Actually, if you go to check the reasons why the Civil War happened in 1860, you will see the fingers of the capitalists, because the reason was not because the South refused to liberate those slaves, 5 million slaves actually, who used to work in the agricultural fields. It was about turning those slaves into consumers. And that what happened after the...
and because the North needed, as you write in your article, they needed the workers.
Exactly.
And they basically were fighting to steal those slaves.
Exactly.
Basically from...
Most of the 5 million slaves who were liberated, they went up north, they worked in factories, and they became consumers who used to buy goods from those capitalists, and so on. So from 1865 until the Civil Rights Movement, a century also, you got the segregation and all the stuff that we know.
Jim Crow.
But actually, those newly liberated slaves, when they came after the, during the rebuilding America after the war, they said to those white liberals from the North, we thank you for liberating us, for fighting this war to liberate us. Now, if you can equate us in rights with you, they refused. So it's telling that it was about profit. Every time it was about profit, they made the move and they claimed that it was about freedom and human rights. If you take a look at what Lyndon Johnson did in the 1960s, and the Democrats in the Congress, they passed 3 laws. We all know what Martin Luther King did, and all the civil rights movement leaders. But what is not known is that the main force that pushed for the enactment of the acts that allowed those people of color to have loans from banks to own their own houses. It was a capitalist force, because those bankers in Wall Street, they wanted to enlarge the base of their customers, to gain more profit, to gain more.
And there's also the fact that they were giving loans in worse conditions than what they were giving to white people.
Exactly.
So they were sucking out
Exactly.
all the money that was left within the black community.
Exactly.
With these loans.
So in the 80s, we all know that when Ronald Reagan came into power, the neoliberal principles were they adopted. We started seeing the wealth being concentrated in the hands of the minority, probably like 5% of the, or maybe less than that, who own more than 70% of the American wealth. And if you take a look now, you'll see that behind the woke culture, the wokeness, there's also a capitalist force pushing towards enacting those, bills in the states, on the state level, to the conclusion. You will conclude that they are trying to commodify the identities of people, to make use, because those who are changing their gender, the transgenders, they have their own clinics, they have their own medicine, and you can always check who is profiting from this.
And their own entertainment.
Exactly.
Yes.
So it's always about profit and interests, capitalist interests, more than about human rights and freedom, you know.
So it's like about creating a market.
Exactly.
And then fulfilling the needs of that market.
Exactly. Sometimes they create the market through wars, because if you go to the aid industry, now we are witnessing what the Americans are doing with the people in Gaza. There's a market now. There is, you know, U.S. companies profiting from the supporting the tools necessary for this pier and the floating port, which is a mockery actually, because the people in Gaza are not benefiting from this means of entering aids. And at the same time, the Biden administration is using it as a means for, you know, whitewashing its figure.
Yeah.
Yeah, because all the atrocities that they are partners with the Zionists and doing in Palestine, they need this, you know, tool to deceive those who are being deceived since decades and centuries.
You know, I didn't have this as a question on the list that I was going to ask you, but since you brought up this issue of aid to Gaza, I mean, there's so many people collecting money, aid, supposed, and it's not going. Exactly. Where is all this aid? I mean, last week there was a conference at the AUB, the American University of Beirut, claiming to be there to bring medical aid to Gaza. And when asking doctors in Gaza, how is this money or aid going to come? They tell you it's not coming. Don't give any money. The people in Gaza that are working on the ground say there's nothing coming. And we look at how the AUB, and behind this conference was the Jordanian government, which has, been stationing itself, positioning itself to be the hub for all of this aid. Clearly, it is not to help the Palestinians. Similarly with the Syrian refugees, how in Jordan. So this aid industry that we just saw since the beginning of this war, should our viewers trust any of it?
Of course, they shouldn't trust all of it, because as we all know from previous conflicts, whenever there's a conflict, whether in Africa, in Asia, or elsewhere in the world, there's always this group of people who deal with it as a business, you know, collecting aids, asking for donations, and it turns out that they take the money and they have it for their own. Actually, the Americans, they promote such way of business, because one of the goals of USAID and other organizations is to spoil the environment within the conflict, because in every conflict there are people who don't want to fight, they want to benefit. Those opportunistic people, they find it their chance to get those money and make some wealth from it. And the Americans know this. This is what the USAID is doing in the Arab world since the Arab Spring. And also, if you go to Southeast East Asia, also in Africa, they are doing it in many parts of the world. The main target is to spoil, because we are talking about corruption, we are talking about,
Undeclared flow of money.
Exactly, because the more they do it, the more they make those elites or those characters in the society dependent on those aids. So no thinking, no work, no real work to have a real economy. Because if you if the country becomes like Jordan, for example. Jordan is is a state that depends on the aids. They get billions of dollars annually in aids. So it's natural that in such a conflict, such war in Gaza, the Jordanians would promote themselves as the hub for all the aid business. With all the show that the Jordanian king is doing, and the whole authorities. And we all know, the partnership of the security agencies in Jordan with the Zionists. Mm-hmm. It's not a secret. I myself, if I go to Amman, to Jordan, they would take me into interrogation, and it turns out that they are working on behalf of the Mossad and the Shin Bet and the Shabak. So I think that the majority of the public now in the Arab world, they know what is the real mission of a state like Jordan. It's a state that fulfills some targets of the West, in precise the Americans, then the British, knowing that the king's mother is British. So we think that people should be aware where they are chipping in their money, because those people are trying to benefit in every way possible.
Well, talking about aid, here in Lebanon, there is a population of 4 million Lebanese, another 2 million Syrians, Palestinians, and foreign workers, so 6 million residents in Lebanon. But there is around 30,000 NGOs, the highest per capita on the planet.
Exactly.
So how and you wrote a lot about the NGOs and their problems here in Lebanon. So let's talk about that. What is the effect of these NGOs in Lebanon? Are they helping anybody really? Or what is the main objective that you see happening?
Actually, it's a long story, but I mentioned earlier that the main one of the true targets is to spoil the elites. This has happened in Lebanon for like more than 15 years now, and we have seen it in a more obvious way after October 17th, 2019. It turned out that those elites who work with the Americans, with the Europeans, they have NGOs, they were accusing each other of, corruption and taking money without conducting the programs that they were supposed to do. Actually, we studied the Americans, what they are doing in Lebanon with the USAID, with NED, and of course with our guy Soros and the Ford Foundation. Actually, they are doing a great thing, because if you take a look, if you make a comparison between what was taking place in 2011 and let's say 2023, they did a big job, because they made the infrastructure necessary for the flourishing of such organizations. The plan was like to turn as much of Lebanon to become like Haiti, an NGOs republic. The more we establish, we fund, we promote establishing more NGOs, the more we will, because there's an economic situation in Lebanon, economic crisis, because the state of poverty is a fertile soil for working for them, because people who need money, need salaries, need aid, they go to those NGOs. Actually, they try to make use of those NGOs in the parliamentary elections in 2022, and they are still working now, though after the war, after October 7th, those NGOs lowered their heads because it was the era of genocide. So they lowered their heads, but now, since the beginning of 2024, I think they are activating their programs, their work, and especially in the areas where there are, people who left their houses in South Lebanon to relocate in other parts from the upper side of South Lebanon, also in Bekaa Valley and the Beirut suburb. I think that maybe on insisting dealing with the Syrian refugees in Lebanon, there's a lot of corruption. There's a lot of wasting money, and some people made huge amounts of money and wealth, and some of them left Lebanon to work and live in Europe, for example. But the true intentions of the Americans and the Europeans to keep those Syrian refugees inside Lebanon, they are refusing that they go back to their countries, to their country, even if there are safe environment to have them back inside Syria.
And the offer was also to just, if you have this money to serve the Syrian refugees, why don't you go and serve them in Syria,
exactly,
so they can resettle? And they're refusing.
They are refusing this because they think that those refugees would be a tool to pressure certain parties inside Lebanon when the time is up, because maybe they would try to use this paper against the resistance inside Lebanon, because they were trying to, pressure the Lebanese government to grant citizenship for a certain portion of those refugees, try to change the demographic inside Lebanon. But such schemes and conspiracies don't work with a strong resistance in Lebanon.
And the Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah, in his speech a couple of speeches ago, spoke specifically about this issue of the Syrian refugees and how the NGOs in the West are playing this card. And he said that if the West doesn't allow the Syrian refugees to go back to their homes, then the Lebanese army and the resistance will help them go to Cyprus and make it Syria again.
Exactly. That's why we saw this Cypriot president come to Lebanon with the other one, the Zionist von der Leyen. They came to Lebanon because they were offering 1 billion euros as a bribe to the Lebanese government, so that those refugees won't be allowed to flee to Europe.
So we talk, you spoke about the NGOs and the situation of the Syrian refugees. You hinted a little bit about the elections and the effects of these NGOs in the elections. And I just want to explain to our viewers here that in Lebanon, there's a sectarian constitution imposed from the French rule time and the Ta'if agreement after the end of the civil war, which makes it impossible for Lebanese citizens to just vote for whatever party they want to. They have to vote according to their confession. And that makes it much easier to manipulate the vote. And of course, after the demonstrations in 2019, when people predicted that there will be some change, in the end, what we saw is that money talks, and whoever can buy votes from whichever sectarian grouping gets the seats. And that's how did the NGOs play in this buying votes situation?
Actually, there was a group of a small group inside the NGO community who worked for bankers from outside Lebanon. They called themselves the platform. The Lebanese version of this platform is called Kuluna Irada.
We're all the will.
Yeah, they openly declared that we are funding those guys in this province and this province, and they claim that they spent $7 million. And of course, we have to doubt this number because it's more than that. But what concerns me as a journalist, I had some reports, investigative reports about this, is that there were bankers who live in Europe, America, and elsewhere in the world. They used to get the funds for Kuluna Irada to spend inside Lebanon before the elections. Those guys, they call themselves the Lebanese international finance executives. Most of them work for BlackRock, UBS, Merrill Lynch, JP Morgan, all the financial financial institutions and banks, hedge funds. Most of them are based in the United States. It turned out that one of those, he was being promoted to the Lebanese people as a technocratic prime minister to lead the cabinet in a technocratic cabinet. He used to manage and he still manages the wallet of Middle East and North Africa for BlackRock. And it turned out that BlackRock is buying the Euro bonds, the bonds that the Lebanese government issued in debt. And now some rumors say that there are billions of dollars that BlackRock had, it possesses now, and we don't know when would be when we would our turn actually would be like the Argentina scenario when they went and sued Argentina to get their bonds. I think it's the same here in Lebanon because they tried to say through those guys, those arms they use inside Lebanon, that Lebanon doesn't own those like $33 billion in debt and bonds. If you are going to privatize the airport and all the agencies and companies that the government owns, you would perhaps you'll get like $9 billion. So you are short here. Maybe you have oil and gas. So they were hinting about having a portion of the oil and gas offshore Lebanon that they might accept as a price for the bonds later on, because this is what they did with African countries, with countries in Latin America. George Soros has done this with Equatorial Guinea, and I think they are planning to do this with Lebanon later on. So the whole NGO parties who worked on this, they promoted themselves as experts when talking about gas and oil and the demarcation of the, economic zone, the economic zone for Lebanon, or
In the
the
sea.
dispute with the Zionist entity. So their voices were so loud, and they were like accusing the resistance and the government that you are giving the Zionists more than they have to have.
Yeah, they know better than the resistance. And on that point of the gas and oil fields in the Mediterranean, you have the U.S. envoy, Amos Hochstein, who is a retired Israeli officer.
Exactly.
And he was here last time, just at the same time as the Hudhud video or the Hoopoe video came out. He also was the one that negotiated the gas and oil field rights in the waters. Give us a little bit more about his background and his visit here this last week.
As you mentioned, he used to be an officer at the Israeli Zionist occupation army. I think he served in South Lebanon in the 90s, but his career as a counselor and an expert in the energy sector, and also you have to take into consideration that he has a lot of friends in Lebanon. He used to work for Telerin. This gas and oil company is run by Lebanese. I guess he's the CEO of the company. And he also knows some politicians. So he thought maybe the Biden administration thought that he's the right person to negotiate this deal. And that's why he has been trying to reach a deal after the role of the Lebanese resistance in aiding the Palestinian resistance in this war. I think the Lebanese know more about Hochstein more than they did in 2022 when he used to come to mediate the deal of the gas and oil and the demarcation of the line. Hochstein is actually carrying with him every time he visits Lebanon the same thing. Reach a deal between Israel and Lebanon to de-escalate, and trying to neglect the fact that the two fronts in South Lebanon and in Gaza are linked. You cannot break this bond. Maybe lately they are confessing this openly in their statements. They are saying that they are telling the Zionists, actually the Netanyahu government, that you can't have calm returning to the northern part of the occupied Palestine and return the settlers without de-escalating the war on Gaza and reaching a ceasefire. This is the fact. The leader of the resistance, Sayyid Nasrallah, said this since the first speech, and since October the 8th, Hezbollah has been aiding the resistance, and they declared that we are aiding and supporting the Palestinian resistance. And actually it's something positive that the resistance managed to succeed in fulfilling now, to make the Americans confess openly that what the resistance Hezbollah is doing in Lebanon has been effective. So to reach a solution here, you have to accept a solution there.
So both times that Hochstein came here with threats, the time when he came to negotiate the line in the waters. And when he came just a week and a half ago to threaten with for a ceasefire with Hezbollah, the Lebanese resistance drones flew. He's now kind of associated with this moment. When he came to threaten around the gas and oil, that's when Hezbollah sent the drones over the Karish field. And now, when he arrived, that's when the video was released of all the sensitive locations around Haifa. So, does his threats? Clearly, he is Zionist himself, but the threats that he keeps on bringing, does his masters on the top know the reality on the ground? Can they actually assess the power of Hezbollah correctly, or are they not in touch with reality?
Actually, it was a program that the Americans tried to follow step by step inside Lebanon to try to force Hezbollah to step back, but they failed actually. So they tried the psychological warfare. They tried using their tools inside Lebanon. I'm talking here about the Lebanese forces and all the factions that said since the day one that Hezbollah is taking us into a war. Hezbollah is doing something that violates our sovereignty and etc. And you got inside Lebanon, you got media outlets who are funded by the U.S. Embassy and other Gulf states embassies, and they have been trying to wage this psychological warfare on Hezbollah and its base since 2019. So they used all those tools to try to put pressure on Hezbollah. So Hezbollah was keen to show some force by sending those drones. Actually, it's some experts say that those drones were sent earlier, but the decision to show the picture, the video, was timed with the visit of Hochstein, because they knew that Hochstein is trying to carry the Israeli threats with him. So they responded on their way. As Hochstein's plane was taking off Beirut Airport, those videos were being aired on TV. And actually, the plan was to put pressure on Hezbollah, and by airing and broadcasting this video, Hezbollah moved pressure to the Zionist entity, to the settler community, because they saw what Hezbollah is able to do, capable to do, and it was a small portion, because they said that to be continued. They have other parts, and they issued another video actually days ago. I think that
and that one, they made sure it's translated in Hebrew and in English.
Exactly, because I think that the resistance is not trying to get those messages to the political elite or the military elite in the Zionist entity. It's more they want the message to reach the normal settlers, because Netanyahu he succeeded in planting this idea inside their heads that they are capable of waging those wars and winning those wars, and this is a dangerous idea that Netanyahu placed in their conscious. I think that the resistance in Lebanon was trying to tell those settlers that take a look, those strategic targets, whether it was military sites, economic sites, civilian sites, because the Zionists are threatening to demolish civilian sites inside Lebanon. So it has to be eye for an eye. I think that those videos succeeded in delivering the message, the necessary message.
Well, according to Israeli media, the next day, 68,000 Israelis left Ben Gurion on one of the, 14 flights to Cyprus a day there is right now this is other than the flights to the rest of Europe and North America. And before we continue on this, this idea of what could happen in a situation of war, tomorrow, I believe, is the first debate between Biden and Trump on CNN. And the elections in the US is scheduled for the first week of November. We're getting very close to that as we're already in this election period. How do you see the war here in Palestine, the war in Lebanon, playing out in the election results, Biden's possibilities, Trump's possibilities?
I wrote about what Biden had to lose among his base, his voters, since the beginning of the primaries, Democratic primaries. I reached a number, I don't know if it's accurate, but I counted the votes, the uncommitted and undecided, and and the protest vote. You can say the protest vote. It's the percentage was like 6%, the solid percentage of the base that inside the Democratic Party that they don't want to vote for Biden. This percentage is not something ineffective. It's going to affect the results because Biden lost the case time after time to end this war. He can end this war because you can take the armament shipments. But I understand that why he is not accepting to put pressure directly on Netanyahu, because if he does so, taking into consideration the results on the ground in Gaza Strip, he would be confessing that the resistance won and there's a defeat to the Zionist army. And taking into consideration that he wants the funds of the Zionists inside the United States, they were too generous with him. In one night in New York, he gathered like $25 million. I think maybe it's beyond the elections now. The war is beyond the elections, and the strategists now, they are trying to think about what's going to happen after the elections. Because if you take a look at what Trump commented about the war, he was asking the Zionists to end the war as quick as they can. The Biden administration wants to end the war, but they can't end this war with the American way, by pressuring Netanyahu directly. They are trying to use Israeli tools from inside the entity to pressure Netanyahu. They used Gantz and Eisenkot. They used three parties from the right, Bennett and Saar and Lieberman. And also now they are using the army itself, the IOF, because if you listen to the spokesman of the Zionist army and the comments of the chief of staff, there's something taking place between the military elite and the political elite governing now in Netanyahu's government. So I think that Biden is still counting on those tools inside the Zionist entity, and also on the Arab regime officials led by Saudi Arabia, because Saudi Arabia was trying to go parallel with the efforts that Tony Blinken was trying to make in the region, to show that the majority of the Arabs, led by Saudi Arabia, are willing to normalize with you if you choose to end the war. This way, they would promote after the war that Saudi Arabia was able to stop the bloodshed inside Gaza Strip using diplomacy and normalization, while Iran and all the resistance factions and movements in the region failed to achieve the goal of ending this war militarily. This is a dangerous idea, actually, and I think the Americans and the Saudis, they are into this together. They tried to reach this point, but the stubbornness of the ultra-right in the Zionist entity is keeping this war go on. Maybe Netanyahu has his own calculations dealing with Trump, trying to give him a paper now, a pressure, and I think Biden added to his health situation and his mental awareness. I think that Gaza now is a player in the elections, and he is going to get the results on November the 5th. It's not going to be an easy elections. Maybe it's going to be the first time that an external issue would be a driver in the elections, because if you list 10 issues that concern the Americans, maybe Gaza is number 9 or number 10. You got the economics, the abortion, the border, the immigration. I think that Gaza, though there is genocide, there is mass killing, there's atrocities being carried out by the Zionists inside Gaza, but the voice of Palestine and Gaza, in precise, was successful in reaching all parts of the globe. All the imperialists who conspired to enable the Zionists to reach their goals inside Gaza on the bloods of the Palestinians are going to pay a price, whether now or in the future.
So let's detail it a little bit more here. So there is around maybe 1.5% of the population in the U.S. that is Muslim, maybe 1% that is Arabic. There is over 2% that are Jewish, 2.5%. Even if we say all the other minorities join the Arabic and Muslim communities in trying to vote against Biden because of his genocidal position, their other option is Trump, which is as much Zionist, as much genocidal. So in a way, like those who are anti-war, anti-genocide in the United States are political orphans. Their vote doesn't count.
Exactly.
The two parties will be not fighting over their vote, they'll be fighting over the Zionist vote and the money of the Zionist lobby. You don't think that this will instigate Biden to take even more right-wing, more radical, more genocidal positions before the elections so he doesn't lose that genocidal vote to Trump?
Actually, if you want to enter the game of counting votes, you got the Muslims, you got the Arabs, you got the progressive Jews, you got the African Americans, you got some isolationist evangelicals who are against war. You got other minorities, as you said. They might constitute like 3 million votes. Up till now, you got in certain states, in certain swing states, you got heavy weight for those minorities. Because if you take, for example, the state of Michigan, you got the Arab and Muslim community who voted uncommitted like 100,001. I think they can make a difference in a swing state. If you take other states, whether it was blue or red, as you said, they are not going to impact the result. I think that what matters now, what we have to study in the coming months or maybe years, is the alignment of the American Jews who used to historically, during the last decades, used to align themselves with the Democratic Party. Because right now, we all know that 70% of the Israel lobby is aligned with the Democratic Party, and 30% is with the conservatives and the GOP. But right now, those Democratic Jews who are committed to Israel's existence and security, they are looking towards the Democratic progressives and maybe feeling uncomfortable to remain in the same party with those guys who are against Israel. So this may, force them to migrate into the GOP or make their own party. That's why there's a theory now that the bipartisan system, political system, is going to change, whether in the United States or in the United Kingdom, because you got the same situation in Britain with the conservatives and the Labour. We saw, candidates who won their seats without aligning themselves with the mainstream Labour Party or the Conservative Party. So there are going to be social and political effects of what is taking place now, because some people think that it's going to be, for a while, and after that, after the war ends, things are going to be business as usual, and everything would return as it was. I don't think this is the case after the war. There are, it's like a glass that has been broken. You cannot glue it back.
Yeah. So you mentioned the UK there. Obviously, what we saw the Zionists do when Corbyn took power in the Labour Party is that they destroyed the Labour Party.
Exactly.
And also took it over. Destroyed it and took it over at the same time. Okay, so it could be, we saw that also repeating, by the way, in Canada with the Green Party. They did the same. They destroyed it and took it over at the same time. And we look at now at the primaries that are happening in the United States, and there's Jamal Bowman in New York, who's been very outspoken on Palestine. The Zionists, who are supposed to be with the Democrats, have raised the biggest political PAC money to fight Jamal Bowman. And their leaders are telling people who are already members of the Republican Party to actually go and register as Democrats.
Exactly.
Just to defeat Jamal Bowman and then switch back to the Republicans. So they, I don't know if there's much hope for a third party in the US after looking at these experiments. But let's go back to our issue here, okay? We were talking just before about the drones, about the war possibilities, the threats that are coming to Lebanon. In the last few weeks, there's been an increase in the attacks, the complexity, the size of weapons that have been used. and the threats keep on coming to Lebanon, including a threat to attack the airport of Beirut. Do you see us moving towards this war, or are these threats as empty as they were 8 months ago?
I think it's normal now as the Zionist government is talking about reaching a point where the intense operations are going to end in Gaza Strip, that they are going to move some of the load, some of the battalions to northern Palestine. So there's a theory since the beginning of the war that after the Zionists are going to end what they're doing in Gaza Strip, they are going to move to the north, trying to deter Hezbollah. If you ask me if you expect a full-scale war with Hezbollah, I don't personally think it's going to expand to this level. But yes, there is going to be escalation, but it's going to be under the face of full-scale war, because the decision for a full-scale war with Lebanon is an American decision. The Zionists are incapable of fighting a war with Hezbollah, who are more equipped, who are more in numbers. Of course, the landscape in Lebanon is different from Gaza, and you got a lot of surprises that Hezbollah possesses and the Zionists don't know about. And you don't have to forget that since 2006, we're talking about 18 years, the Zionists were deterred, which means they were afraid to wage a war against Lebanon because they know there are certain capabilities that can damage a lot of the military force they possess. Hezbollah was keen to show some of the capabilities they have, especially the anti-aircraft defense systems. They downed more than like 5 advanced drones, and also they were hinting that they have anti-aircraft defense systems that can at least make it difficult for the fighter jets, the F-16s and F-15s to,
there was a missile that was fired at an F-15
actually,
a couple of weeks ago, yeah.
So who knows, maybe they got more advanced than this missile. So this is something, the unknown here makes the Americans and the Zionists reconsider their plans, because there are rumors now saying that the Americans got some Iranian messages that a full-scale war with Hezbollah means a regional war. So I don't think the Americans are willing to get involved in another endless war, what they call the endless war in the Middle East, because this war, if it takes place, it's not going to be like the war in Iraq or the war in Afghanistan. They are facing a more tough, more trained, more armed, it's not going to be easy. So if they spend $7 trillion on the wars of Iraq and Afghanistan, they are going to spend more on a war with the axis of resistance. It's not easy. And I think that the Zionists, they are trying to use this threats of war to maybe reach a compromise with the negotiations, the indirect negotiations taking place through the mediators like Hochstein and also the Europeans, because you got the French, They are sending their envoy to Lebanon every while. Hopefully, the Zionists are going in the end to accept the fact that Hezbollah succeeded in aiding the Palestinians in Gaza Strip and also in deterring the Zionists from waging a full-scale war on Lebanon.
Let's, connect this to what we were just talking about with the earlier about Netanyahu having fights with the military, having fights with his former cabinet members, having fights with his current cabinet members. This, the cohesion falling apart of the state apparatuses and the elite. Wouldn't that, given that, Israel is unable to defeat the Palestinian resistance in Gaza, and it cannot admit defeat because that will accelerate its internal collapse. Wouldn't that be giving an impetus to Netanyahu to actually push for a war with Lebanon, even knowing that he's going to lose it because he needs the U.S. to enter this war on his behalf?
Actually, if you go and read the history of Netanyahu since he was a kid, until he came into power in the Zionist entity, you would easily discover that his main goal in his political life is to drag the United States into fighting Israel's war in the region to get rid of his enemies, of Israel's enemies. That's the target of the Likud party led by Benjamin Netanyahu. Netanyahu was someone who was key in defining the term terrorism in the United States. If you take into consideration what he did in 1979, he made a conference in Al-Quds, Jerusalem. What he used to run was called the Jonathan Institute. This Jonathan Institute was named after his brother, who was an officer in the special forces in the Israeli occupation forces. And he later, when he went back to the United States in 1984, he used to work as a representative of the Zionist entity in the UN. He made another conference in Washington, D.C. If you take a look at the people who he shared in this conference, you would take a look at the ambitions of Netanyahu to have an effect, to have a fingerprint when talking about the future adventures of the Americans in the region, in the Middle East in precise, because this is a major target of the Likud and Netanyahu. Of course, his plan is to remain in power for, infinity, till he dies. He wants to be the monarch of the Zionists. And this is what he's doing since the second time he came into power in 2009. I think if you go study the relation between the Likud and the Messianic movement inside the Zionist entity, the spiritual father of this movement, the modern movement, is Meir Kahane, the Rabbi Meir Kahane. He is the father, the spiritual father of the religious Zionism now, who are sharing the government with Netanyahu. I don't think that they are blackmailing Netanyahu. It's a two-way relation between the Likud and those two parties led by Smotrich and Ben Gvir. There is a move now. If those provisional Zionists, they are trying to make a coup against the political Zionists. The political Zionists are resembled now by Benny Gantz, Eisenkot, the leadership of the army, and the rest of, what they call the left inside the Zionist entity, and also the liberals led by Lapid. All of those, they are the political Zionists who think that the state of Israel was founded on their shoulders. The army is composed of those, secular factions, and they are pushing the religious portion of the Zionists to change something. Because if you take a look at the Haredim crisis, whenever there's a war against Palestinians, there's a renewed talk about enlisting Haredims in the army. It happened in 2002 after the invasion of Jenin. It happened in 2012 after the war with the resistance factions in Gaza Strip. And it happened in 2014 after the 51 days war. And it's happening now. So we conclude that the act of resistance by the Palestinians is provoking those, contradictions inside the Zionist entity. And actually, I was surprised to know that the Haredim problem, enlisting them in the army, goes back to 1953. Ben Gurion made a deal with the rabbis that he was caring about the demographic issue. So he made a deal with those rabbis. You come to the state of Israel, and in return, we would give you money, and you are not going to be enlisted in the army, your sons. And this deal...
just make us babies, as many babies as possible, so we can win that demographic.
Exactly. But the secular section, the political Zionists, later on they started to raise the issue. Why do we have to fight and die? For you to live, you only read the Torah and study it, and you get the money from the government. We die and you live, and you don't fight. So this contradiction inside the Zionist entity, it's rising on the top, on the surface. And I think that this is, you can understand when Sayyid Nasrallah in the first speech after the Al-Aqsa flood operation in November 3rd, at the end of his speech, he said, our fight with the Zionists is with points. And the strategic punch to defeat this entity has not, the time of this punch has not arrived. So he was hinting that the main mission of the resistance is to create the circumstances that would re-escalate those contradictions laying inside the Zionist entity, in the settler community. The Haredi issue is one of them. You got a lot of issues like when you talk about the main narrative used by the World Zionist Organization to recruit those Jews from the world, to convince them that you are going to the country, the safest country in the world, where the land of opportunity, you got a chance. They are not actually finding this security that they were promised. They are continuously witnessing wars, sirens going every time. So those settlers, a large portion of them, you got blackout now. They are not publishing the numbers of the settlers who left, who fled the Zionist entity now, returning back to Europe or other places of the world, because they are afraid. Actually, Naftali Bennett today expressed openly his fear that more Jewish settlers are going to flee Israel. This is a success for resistance, because those contradictions, those factors and circumstances the Zionists are facing now were triggered by the resistance. This is the main mission of the resistance, taking into consideration that the collective West is insisting on helping this Zionist entity and protecting it, and providing the umbrella to keep it alive.
You mentioned Netanyahu wanting to drag the U.S. always to fight his wars, and of course, the famous situation is him going to Washington before the war on Iraq to convince the American Congress to vote to invade Iraq on his behalf, of course. And the other thing is, what our viewers should know is just today, we don't know when we're going to release this episode, but just earlier, a court in Israel ruled that the army can go and take these Haredim that are being called to the army, arrest them and force them into the army. So we're going to see some of these clashes, internal contradictions playing out. Definitely Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah and the axis of resistance, who are trying to limit the number of overall dead, martyred in our region, while we reach the goal of the destruction of the Zionist colony and end of it. Alhamdulillah, their plan is working out. Tayyib, in terms of your book that you wrote, and this is, I think, a very important thing to kind of connect, to show how the Palestinian, the Arab, the Lebanese, the people who are resisting American imperialism are harassed all over this planet. You wrote a book about the accusations against Hezbollah being involved in Latin America, in the drug trade, in the smuggling. Explain to us, why would the Zionists and the Americans focus on the Lebanese communities in Latin America? What's really their objective of creating these stories?
Actually, there are more than one objective, but the main objective, if you track the accusations historically, you will go to the late 80s. I'm talking about the adoption of the accusations by the Americans. It took place first in 1988. But before that, the Zionists used to accuse Hezbollah of dealing with drugs. But I tried to track to find who was the first one who said something about a fatwa, a religious fatwa, that would, because Hezbollah is a religious movement in Islam. Dealing with drugs, using drugs is forbidden. So to make it reasonable, they said that there's a fatwa. I went on to check who was the first one who talked about a fatwa. It turned out that the guy was named Yusuf Budansky. He's a Zionist, Israeli. He used to be an officer in one of the Mossad divisions. Before that, he used to be in the IOF. In the late 70s, he went to the United States, and he was, adopted by the neoconservatives. Talking about Wolfowitz, Richard Pearl, and Bryan, and the rest. And actually, when the issue of Jonathan Pollard was raised and he was caught and taken into custody, Yusuf Bodansky disappeared for 6 months because there were rumors that he was helping Pollard, and he was delivering information on behalf of Pollard to the Zionists. And some rumors say that Bodansky was sent to the United States to get intelligence, classified information about the manufacturing of the F-16s, because they had their own program to manufacture their own fighting jet. Bodansky later on, at the late 80s, he was appointed as a counselor in the Congress for the Republicans and for the CIA, and also at the Pentagon, counseling the Pentagon on certain issues dealing with the Middle East region. So in 1993, he issued his book. It's called Islam is the Enemy for the West.
Very straightforward title.
If you take a look at the references in his book, he mentioned the fatwa. The fatwa says, quote, the Jews and the Americans are our enemies. If we can't fight them with guns, let's fight them with drugs. This is the end quote. So I tried to search for the origins, check if it's true or not. I went to the houses, to the leaflets that were used to be published in the late 80s to check who was the marja or the cleric who issued this. I couldn't find anything actually. In the reference, there's something. He said JANA, March 20th, 1990. What is JNNA? I went to search what is those letters resemble. It turned out that he used the Jamahiriya news agency from Libya. Mm-hmm. And we all know that the Libyan regime, the Gaddafi regime, was in fight with the Shia because of the issue of Sayyid Musa Sadr. Yes. So if I want to take it from an academic point of view, it's not reliable to take a Libyan source to accuse a Shia group that look to Sayyid Musa Sadr as as an ideal for them, and it started from there. I could, I could scan more than 16 writer and author who used this alleged fatwa in their books and later in papers, academic papers, and it was used inside the Congress. I called my book the title Under the Capitol's Dome because the whole accusations were, made facts legalized under the Capitol's dome, because they made hearings since 2005 until the peak in 2018. In 2018, we know that in October 2018, Trump signed the decision by the Department of Justice to designate Hezbollah as a transnational
terrorist organization,
a criminal organization, because they failed through contacting governments and trying to convince them to enlist Hezbollah, designate them as a terrorist organization. This way, by designating Hezbollah as a transnational criminal organization, they would bypass a lot of barriers and obstacles, and you can use the Interpol in pursuing or targeting certain Lebanese worldwide. And this what they did to the Lebanese diaspora in Latin America in general, and in the tri-border area between Paraguay and Brazil and Argentina. I have friends in the area, and I speak with them regularly. They express their, their fear to show that they are successful in their business, because the local authorities there and the FBI regional center there, when they see a Lebanese in this area who is, showing that he has money, he would be blackmailed. More than a case, people were blackmailed, pay $50,000 or else we will, accuse you that you are working on behalf of Hezbollah. So they tried to use this accusation against the diaspora in this area to force them actually in the end to flee the area, because they claim, some of the Paraguayans and the Brazilians, they say that there are gas fields in this area, and there are future, projects to extract this onshore wealth. Of course, the Zionists are benefiting from this accusation because they try to target the image of Hezbollah, because as a successful organization, a non-state actor who was able to defeat the mightiest army in the region, in the Middle East, with the cultural identity as a religious group that was able to do what others failed to do. When we talk about the history of the Arab-Israeli conflict. So, of course, this example that Hezbollah put in front all the people of the region is threatening to the American interests, the Zionists, and also to the official Arab regime, because the monarchs in the Gulf and also other Arab states, they see Hezbollah as a threat. You can check this in WikiLeaks cables. Bin Zayed, when he used to sit with the U.S. administration officials during the 2006 war, he was expressing his fear. He was telling them it's dangerous that the Arab public believe that Hezbollah won this war with Israel. So Hezbollah, I don't think that the reason why Hezbollah didn't react to this, maybe it has to deal with the they don't want to give the Americans and the Israelis the chance to drag him into this region, because we all know that Hezbollah pays most of its budget on military and security efforts, and a small portion for media and social activity. If the media concern would be the bigger, it would be on behalf of the military and security, and this is the main target of the Americans and the Zionists. This is one of the objectives of trying to distort the image of Hezbollah by accusing it using drugs and dealing with drugs, and they are still doing it, though they finished what they had to do to force the Americans and a lot of nations, now probably 30 states worldwide, designate Hezbollah as a transnational criminal organization as well as a terrorist organization.
You mentioned the Gulf countries, and of course here in the Arabic media, the Gulf-controlled media constantly talks about Hezbollah and drugs and smuggling and so on. So it's a very similar situation, and this is of course affecting Lebanese diaspora in the Gulf countries. Their businesses also, they're getting harassed in that way. And we look at the difference in size of the Lebanese and Arabic community as in general in Latin America in comparison to the Jewish population, and you see the threat of integration of these Arab diasporas and getting into power position. We all remember the president of Argentina was the Syrian Lebanese. So there is on purpose an attempt to not allow the Arabic diaspora in Latin America to be integrated and get into positions of power. For all our viewers, there is an English version of your book hopefully coming out soon. I remind everybody it's called Under the Capitol Dome, Breaking Down American Accusations about Hezbollah's Role in Latin America. And it was published at the end of 2023, just before the war in Gaza. Ali Hassan Mourad, thank you very much for being with us. There's so much we can talk about. Hopefully we'll have another meeting and we can talk, inshallah. Thank you very much for staying with us. This is Wartime Cafe. Our website is freepalestine.video. Donate, go and visit all our socials and continue following our episodes. We'll have more special guests from Lebanon, from the region, thinkers, fighters, people that are working, so you can hear their opinions and how we are working towards our liberation in this region. See you next time.